back to the Talent Whisperer podcast. It's your host, Chipochedu. And today's guest is someone I've known a really, really long time, Dr. Grieve Chelwa. Not only have I known him a long time, I've also just really admired you a long time. And I'm really glad to have you here. You're literally one of the smartest people I know. Not jokes, like literally one of the smartest people I know. So a bit about Grieve. Or do I need to say doctor?
Well, you could call me Grieve, but you're raising the expectations.
Okay, right.
I'm now freaking out. Yeah.
Don't freak out. We only say facts. So I'll call you Grieve. I'll drop doctor for now. So Grieve is the director of research at the Institute on Race, Power and Political Economy at the New School, which is based in New York. He is also a senior fellow at Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. It's big words. He has been a senior lecturer in economics at the University of Cape Town, at the University of Cape Town's Graduate School of Business, where you also served as the director of MBA program, right?
Yes.
And then before joining UCT, you were the inaugural postdoctoral fellow at the Center for African Studies at Harvard University. Let me say that again because that was a lot. You were the inaugural postdoctoral fellow at the Center for African Studies at Harvard University. We have to say Harvard University, right? We can't miss that. Grieve's opinions have appeared in outlets including the New York Times, the Washington Post, the BBC, France 24, Bloomberg, NPR, Businessday, Lusaka Times, ZNBC, let's not forget our local platforms, and many other platforms as well. So welcome, Grieve, to the Talent Whisperer podcast.
Wow, Chipo, thank you so much. It's nice to sit down with you and chat. And you're right, we've known each other since the 90s.
Since the 90s.
Went to the same primary school. So
exactly.
It's a long, long friendship.
A long, long friendship. And when you hear someone read out your profile, which by the way I had to summarize a little. So when you hear someone read out your profile, how does that, is like an awkward feeling? How does that make you feel?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's I don't know, it evokes many kind of sort of reactions within me. What am I doing, wasting my time in this kind of work when I could be doing something far more interesting? This is what I ask myself. But
I'm like, wait, what could be more interesting than race, power, and political economy? That sounds super interesting to me.
You could be making music, you could be painting, you could be writing fiction, man. You could be playing football. Those are interesting. Those are things that I think a big chunk of the world likes to follow, right? So those things must be interesting. Nobody follows the stuff that's on my CV.
There's always people, there's always a group of people on Twitter that follow that just know stuff. I'm always like, what time how do you know this? Do these statistics just exist in your vocabulary? I always wonder.
Yeah, why are you wasting your time knowing all this obscure stuff?
Anyway, let's get started. So I knew you in primary school, quite all right, but I think it's always nice to go back and for the sake of our audience as well, it's always nice to go back and see if we can tie the past to the Grieve now. So what were you like as a kid, and were there any signs that you'd be doing exactly what you're doing right now?
If you ask my mother, she probably would say no, because she was incredibly frustrated with me.
Really?
Do that. Why can't you be more like your cousins? So what was I like as a child? I guess I was just like any childhood, experiences. Being naughty, playing football, watching football, doing the stuff that kids do. Obviously, at that age, I had no conception of what it meant. I'm an academic. That's my sort of my identity, my profession, right?
Yeah.
So which means what do I do for a living? I study stuff for a living. I get paid.
Fascinating.
No, actually not. But so obviously, I had no conception of that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like one could make money from it. So I was really an typical type of childhood. Mm-hmm. That was my childhood.
So can I tell you that can I answer your own question a bit, and tell you there were signs? There were signs you'd be doing exactly what you're doing today, there were signs you'd be doing something smart. Is the fact that and I always repeat this to you whenever we meet and I'm a bit drunk, or I always tell you this story about how when we were in primary school, and I know you remember this. I think I was in 4th grade at the time, and you were in 7th grade.
Yeah.
And every school assembly, when they were giving out prizes, right? There was, badges for effort, badges for this. I remember getting a badge for effort. But then when it came to your grade, there was always this academic excellence badge, right? And our headmaster at the time, VM, Victor Mlenga, may he rest in peace. Yeah. Every time he would be about to mention, and I guess it was like grade 7 for academic excellence. Like the whole school would shout your name. It was like a thing, if you remember. Would all shout, Grieve.
Oh my, I see.
And then he would always say, Grieve Chelwa. Like clockwork, every assembly. So at that time, you were the smartest guy.
Wow, so I was a nerd is what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying you were a nerd. You seemed like a pretty social, but at that time, there were signs that whatever you do with your life would be pretty smart.
And that's very kind of. I had forgotten about that.
Really?
So
that's the one memory. Like that's one of my, not just about you in primary school, but that's one of my fondest memories of Chadley House School. Just those assemblies when would shout your name then you would go and get your your prize.
It's funny how memory works, because I don't remember the audience screaming my name.
Really?
I do recollect. It's vague, but in my mind it seems like it was one day I got a prize once. But so it's funny how memory works, how that memory
So I'll use that camera. So if you were at Chadley House School during this time, you should probably post a comment, because I know you remember this. I'm going to share this in some Chadley House groups too, just so was I the only one who remembers this? Okay, so let's jump to high school. Where did you go? I'm sure you got good grades, pretty sure. So where did you go to high school? And by the time you were in the 12th grade, what were you hopeful for? What were you thinking you'd study after school? And was what you were thinking about what you ended up doing?
Okay, cool. So, by the way, thank you for taking me back memory lane and reminding me about the Chadley House days. So I went to Munali Secondary School for grade 8 and 9.
Yeah.
And then David Kaunda for a secondary school for grade 10, 11, and 12.
Okay.
And so what was that experience like? I mean, it's very interesting to transition from primary school to secondary school. Sort of, I think you transition at a time that is, if I do the math correctly, when you're almost becoming a teenager. I think it's almost
coincides.
Like
you normally,
exactly.
It's like everything changes at the same time.
Exactly. So it's a very interesting time, and it's like a coming of age time.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. But what was I thinking I would do with my life in secondary school? Grade 8 and 9, and now you're taking me down memory lane. So I began to watch a lot of TV. So I think it coincides with the time that MultiChoice sets up an office. They open up offices in Lusaka, so we get access to TV beyond ZNBC, because up to a time...
Gosh, what a time.
What a time, right?
What a time.
Remember all we did. I mean, there's some people who are going to be listening to this podcast who cannot conceive of a time when all you had was one TV station.
Yes.
Or just one ZNBC. Yeah. And we all watched the same programs.
Same things.
Right? But there's a time when so MultiChoice comes to town. They open up Mnet.
Yeah.
And then so I began to be exposed to art, culture. So and then I was playing with the idea of, hey, maybe these guys who direct films are very interesting. Maybe I could direct films as well. That was sort of like the dream, 8 and 9.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know what happens. It's good to dream, but then there's also dreams can sometimes need to be realistic. So I think as I transition to grade 10, 11, and 12, it kind of changes. Also, it coincides with me going to David Kaunda. It was a highly competitive school.
Yes,
right? It was. Highly competitive, those kinds of things. So at DK, as it is known, I began to think about, okay, so I'm doing well in the sciences. So I began to think maybe I should become a doctor. Again, it's part of the Zambian socialization.
Yes.
I think it's something that's not unique to me. You're doing well in school, you should become a doctor.
Yeah.
You should become an engineer.
There are 5 careers.
Exactly. Pick one.
Yeah.
So I thought I was headed in that direction up until the time I finished high school. I thought I was going to end up as an engineer or a doctor or something like that.
Yeah.
Clearly, I wasn't smart enough, so I did economics.
So you did economics. Okay. And, when you ended up doing economics, and then you probably had a few options after that. I know you joined Citibank after that, but then you ended up in the world of academia. And I guess for my sake and probably a few others, what careers, I guess, what is like academia, and then what careers outside, I guess, teaching and research. I don't know if there's any other careers in academia. Like, I don't think I understand it fully. I just know there are people who are academics and they're normally very interesting and have very deep conversation and say things like Proust and like and Karl Marx,
or
and I'm
interesting.
like, or
That's
interesting.
that's interesting.
That's interesting. And they always have like a very interesting drink choice. You know,
And they have a pipe sometimes.
and a pipe, yes. And I'm always like, oh, that seems very. Oh, and tenure. I don't even know what tenure is. I just know about tenure. So I don't know much about it. I know about it as like a concept. But you know, what type of careers are in academia, and what do you do exactly?
So essentially, we have universities, or at least institutions of higher learning, which is they teach beyond high school, right? And you know, in school, sort of primary, secondary, those schools are run by teachers, you know, so we know what, you know, exactly. And then institutions of higher learning are also folks run those places and administer the instruction, and those are often what are known as academics, right? So you essentially work in a university and you teach and you do research. And there's some requirements. At the very least, often you have to have had a master's degree to be able to teach. And it's so that's essentially an academic.
Okay.
It's like an academic career, and so your days are spent teaching. So you're teaching undergraduates, you're teaching postgraduates, and then you're also researching. So often when you go beyond the first degree, you have to specialize in something.
Yeah.
And you get a master's, you're mastering a field.
Yeah,
So you become an expert in that field, and you
yeah.
continue adding to that field. Then what you're learning in your studying that field, you share it with the undergraduates, and you know. So that's essentially an academic.
What makes someone like a professor? I've always wondered. I could have easily Googled this, but I didn't. Because I know at some point you were a professor, right? Were you?
So there are many different academic systems. So there's the US system, and then there's the British system, which some parts of the world work on the British system. I think in Zambia, the University of Zambia, for example, is under the British system.
Interesting.
Understandably so, because of colonialization, right?
Yeah.
In the American system, immediately you start to teach in a university. When you get an appointment, you are known as a professor. Right, so you start off as an assistant professor, associate professor, full professor. Those are the ranks. In the British system, not necessarily so. A professor is indicative of a particular rank. It's like in the military, right? So in the military, you have ranks. You've got, if you go to the level of general, you've got 1-star general, who's a brigadier general, 2-star major general, 3-star lieutenant general,
even that I didn't know.
and then full general, 4-star.
That's very cool.
So similarly in academia, you have ranks, and these ranks are based on seniority. So it's based on often how long you've been an academic for, because the longer, the more, in theory, wiser you are. So you move up the ranks.
Yeah.
So that's essentially. So in the US, professor is colloquial for somebody who teaches in a university. In the British system, it means you have reached the highest level of distinction.
Like anything British, there's
it's like
a
class
system. You have to go. It's a class. By the time
Correct.
Okay, that was very useful for me. That was selfishly a question just for me.
I know my academic friends are like, this guy is skipping so much detail.
Like he's not giving it the substance.
It is too summarized.
Right. Whilst they smoke on a pipe, he's not giving it what needs to be.
I disagree.
Yeah, I disagree. It's interesting, but I disagree.
Yeah.
So you've had the opportunity to study and work at some of the most prestigious universities, not just in Africa, but in the world, right? And I imagine for some of the roles that you've had, you've probably like, maybe first Zambian. This is me just assuming, because you've had some pretty cool jobs, right? And if someone, I always wondered this. I think after I started working a lot more internationally, and your peers with someone who's gone to like a university like Harvard, they went to Wharton Business School, or they went to Oxford, and you start thinking to yourself like, okay, this person is not very different from me. Like, yes, they went there. It's probably like, there's probably privilege or whatever, but when it comes to like brain and smarts, like we can go toe to toe, right?
I agree.
So what advice would you give someone when it comes, because a lot of us just tend to discount ourselves without even trying, right? So what do you think you did differently? If you look at different people who've pursued academia, you, I think, are doing pretty well, granted, in that field. What do you think you did differently, and what advice would you give someone who has that like quiet desire, but they're too afraid to even mouth that, I want to go to Harvard? What type of advice would you give them, and where can they go looking? What should they be doing?
Wow. I mean, there's a great deal of luck in life, like as we know, like many. I'm sure it's your story, right? If somebody had to ask you a question around, because you have done very well for yourself. You in many ways are a leader in the Zambian space in terms of thinking about human resources and resourcing, how you resource a company with the right kind of people. And I think people come to you for that kind of advice. They consider you a leader.
Do.
Right, and that's right. So, how did this happen, Chipochedu? I suppose the answer you would give is, okay, there's some stuff you've got to do. You've got to be prepared. So you have to get the training. So you must have received training that allows you to understand the nitty gritty, the actual nuts and bolts of that particular profession.
Right.
But there's also some luck. I mean, the old cliched saying, opportunity met with preparation or something that, So it's a great deal of luck, but you also have to be prepared. In my case, I think at some point, particularly when I went to the University of Zambia, I think that's the time when I began to think seriously about an academic career. Like this sounds fascinating to me, the idea of getting paid to learn. You're like a lifelong student, right? It sounds like
never really thought about
it's
it
like a really cool gig, So
it actually is.
So you begin to read up on biographies were very important to me at a particular point. Getting to know how did this particular academic get to be who they are and their success. So often people write stories in their biographies, and then you begin to read those biographies and you begin to say, okay, they did this, they did that. I might try to mimic some of that. And also mentors. I think that stuff is also very important. Like talk to people who've done it or who've been there, and then ask them, how can I get there as well? That stuff is also very important. But we should also not discount the role of luck. I mean, our lives, in many ways, the fact that we were born Zambian, Chipo, I could have been born in a French-speaking African country.
Could have.
Right, and that might have meant a completely different trajectory for me, right? But I was born in a stable, peaceful, English-speaking country, right? So anyways, and then I was born at a particular time when maybe the country was opening up in very interesting ways. So again, that's luck. But I think some of the stuff, try to learn about the lives of the people who've succeeded in that particular
field.
Yeah.
So you sounded a bit like, what's that Malcolm Gladwell book? The one that talks about...
Is that the 10,000? The one about... Is it, what is it? I've never read any of his books,
anyway,
by the way.
He has this book where he talks about the same thing, luck, where people born, like everything just comes together. Being born at a particular time, and in a particular country, going, and he uses examples like Bill Gates. Yes, we will sit and say, oh wow, he's a billionaire, he did this. And yes, we're not discounting that he's smart and he's hardworking and he's prepared and he's talented. But there's also the time he was born, where he was born, where he grew up, having access to that first computer that sparked his curiosity. So that kind of... Without you reading Malcolm Gladwell's book, that kind of is what you're saying.
Yeah, consider Netflix, right, which is big even in Zambia now. Without the internet, so somebody could have come up with this idea of Netflix, but it might have been 10 years too early. So you're right. I think I agree. And I feel it in my own situation that certain things were happening beyond me, beyond my own effort, that enabled, what happened. Twitter, for example, was a very important thing for me. So in many ways, I think my growing my network and growing the number of people who listen to some of the nonsense I have to say. Twitter enabled that. And when that happens, a lot of people have reached out to me, for example, asking me to comment on one thing or the other because of Twitter. So that Twitter had to happen. If Twitter hadn't happened, I would have just been another young chap in Lusaka with maybe interesting ideas, but with nobody else, no platform and no audience to share that with. Right, but Twitter was able to enable that. So things, I guess, are pretty important.
I guess it's a bit like podcasting.
It's a bit like podcasting.
I always had the fantasy of a TV show, but I remember a time that having a TV show was nearly impossible.
Correct.
But now we can do this in my living room.
Exactly.
And put it out, and it doesn't matter that I'm not...
You're not in a you're not with a network.
Exactly. So
you don't have to work for a particular TV station. You can do it.
They don't have to censor me.
They don't have to censor you.
I can drink consent. It's great.
For the record, this is water.
That is great. That's water that tastes like gin and tonic, but good for you. So Grieve, when you think about yourself and you sum up the different parts of you that make you, what would you say are your particular gifts and talents?
Wow. And before we got on this podcast, we were talking about different cultures and how some cultures are very comfortable about singing their own praises.
Yeah.
Where in Zambia we're socialized very differently.
Yeah, you have to be
humble. You have to be humble.
Humble will get you elected as president.
So
in these parts. Yeah.
I mean, so I really, I mean, the one thing that's, and I know it sounds cliche, but it's this, you got a consistency, right? You have to be, and I think I have heard, I've never saw it, one downside, I've never read Malcolm Gladwell's books, but I should. But I know,
I think you'd love them.
I think I should read them. But I know from, second hand that he has a book where he talks about the 10,000 rule.
Yeah.
10,000 hour rule,
yes.
right? So part of it is being tenacious, consistent. That's one thing I know how to do well. I keep trying.
Was it just there? Like your... is that? I'll give you an example. Consistency is something that I had to learn.
Okay.
I'm literally like a person that if we're sitting here and, a butterfly. What were we doing? Were we recording a podcast?
I see.
Yeah. So to stay consistent,
like focused on one thing,
has been an effort for me,
correct.
Right? So was that just always there? Your ability to just stay on beat?
I have no idea. I mean, I get distracted. I still struggle with it. But I think I maybe, people credit stuff to their parents. I'm sure there was a time that my mother and father were, focus. You got to focus on this. Yeah. If you want to succeed, focus on this kind of stuff. So, I mean, that's one thing that I think, just focusing and obsessing. Being obsessive, not obsessive compulsive, but just obsessing about something, and just so I'm luckily I can do that, I think.
Yeah.
But and then I also have this kind of curiosity. I'm a curious person. At least I was when I was a bit younger. I want to know about things. I want to know. So I mean, again, the internet arrives. It allows you to Wikipedia things.
Yeah.
Right. So you see something, you're watching a film or you're listening to something on the radio, and then somebody says something. They mention some city or they mention some person.
Yeah.
You want to look them up. Who is this person? Who's this writer? What did they write? Where did they live? That kind of, so curiosity is also pretty.
As someone who, we both watch a lot of TV and a lot of movies, do you find yourself Googling stuff during pause?
You pause it and then exactly, right?
I do that all the time.
Exactly.
I'm like, what was that? Especially loosely based on real events. Oh gosh, I go down a rabbit hole. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's true. So Fargo has that.
Fargo has that. There are so many that we can mention. Yeah. I stop. I literally pause and then I go deep down.
So you're curious as well.
Yeah,
so you could have made an academic.
I think I would have made a fabulous academic.
I know.
I think I would have made a
very generous academic. With the grades.
Yes.
Giving everybody A's.
Everybody A's.
Like Oprah, you get an A.
Yeah, you get an A. You get an A. But aside from that, I think I didn't think of it that way, that getting paid to learn. I can spend my whole day immersed in topics, actually. Then I have to once again remember, I have a job.
Exactly.
And then, so I easily go down rabbit holes. And so you haven't, I don't know, is it just me, or you haven't mentioned the fact that you're also like very good at the, I'm trying not to use the word smart, but when did you know that you were actually a cut above a lot of people? When did you know you were in the something percentile? Like, I won't say the percentile because I don't know, but like you don't get to where you've gotten without having slightly more better, decent grades. So when did you know, like, wait, my brain can do things?
I don't think I can. I don't think that's. I mean, I don't think I go around saying, "Oh my God, I'm smarter than everybody
Okay,
else."
I'm telling you.
Oh, okay,
So
you're
so
very
so
kind.
so when, like, how have you just? I guess my question is, do you know, or does it just feel natural to you?
It's a very difficult thing to ask. Let's see. Let me think about it. I mean, what I do know is, it's somehow easier for me to quickly understand something. Those kinds of skills. But to say that I'm smarter than a lot of people, I doubt it. I
Yeah.
doubt it that that's the case. I think
Yeah.
it is more. I tend to be very curious, so I take time to figure things out. Right. I tend to be this idea of persistence, obsessiveness. I think those things. But I have no idea. I may maybe if it is the case I'm smart, it is because of my mother, right? Because apparently children get intelligence
from their mother.
From their mothers. So we should ask my mother this question.
Yeah. Yeah. I should check with my mother too. I think my mother is very smart. So
and it shows.
Yeah, I think she is. Would you consider a career in politics?
No.
Why not?
Again, because I think my one of my biggest faults is being like obsessively logical, right? So the thing I don't allow for contradictions. So like if I'm going to say something, I should mean it, and I should stand by it, and I'll try my level best to make it happen. It seems to me politics is.
It's very.
They're okay with being
it's like,
living lives of contradictions.
I said that, but no, they won't even acknowledge they said it. Yeah. It's like it just never happened.
Never happened.
Yeah.
So I think I would struggle.
Yeah.
I would struggle a great deal.
What would you wish? Because I've seen, like, I follow you on Twitter. I've read some of your articles. So you do care about social injustice.
Yeah.
You do. You're well versed in economics. So I guess you kind of have to, right?
Yeah.
What would you say you'd wish your contribution to be? I'm going to make it particular to Zambia.
Yeah.
Like, what would you wish for your contribution to be? To your country?
I'm first of all, you're right. I obsess about social justice.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me many in this country, by the way, somewhere in the order of more than 60% of the population are poor.
Yeah.
Which is almost everybody.
Yeah.
And even those who are not poor are mostly poor. So we're a country of very poor people. And when I look at my own life and I try to understand why is it that I am, for example, sitting on this table in conversation with Chipwa, she's taking me seriously. I mean, a lot of things explain it, but also a big chunk is just the lack of the draw. I was born in a family where my father had gone to university. My mother had attended college. So that sets me up in a particular way. But that was pure luck. Right.
Once again.
But we shouldn't build societies where, tossing a coin.
Where it's chance, eh?
Chance. You could end up born in a township with no future, or you could be born in Kablonga with a future. We've got to build societies where every child who's born has got a chance. So because of this is why I sort of obsess about social justice. Yeah. Now, what do I want my contribution to Zambia be? Right? A country that I think we all care about.
Yeah.
Just to continue making this argument that we need to build a Zambia where every child who's born has got a chance, right? We need to build that kind of country where every child who's born has got a chance. And every person who lives in Zambia lives a life that has dignity, right? Yeah. Where, they're not exploited, they're not humiliated. I think if I can contribute in making that kind of argument and making the case, and then and it turns out that it becomes national policy.
Yeah.
And I'd have succeeded.
Turns out someone listens.
Somebody listens, right? So that's so that when I see a lot of injustice on Twitter, talking about Twitter or Facebook or in the newspapers, it breaks my heart. When I see, people going without meals, that's heartbreaking. And I think we have the resources in this country to be able to do things differently.
Yeah. I love that. That's good. I should think about that more. I think I try to contribute in my own way, but like the same thing that you've said, I think it's very easy to shut yourself or to just block yourself mentally, to just have these walls that you put up, because it's heartbreaking to see. So you just naturally put up these walls and choose not to see, not to be exposed to children who don't have a chance, because it's just easier.
And it's easy to tell a story. You're right, Chip. In addition to that, it's easy to tell a story that justifies our position. To say, oh, I'm where I am because the only thing I did was work hard.
Yes, I worked hard.
Forgetting that many people in this country work hard.
Work harder
than us. And they're not where we are. So there must be something else. And big chunk of that is a lack of the draw. And the societies, or what we call developed countries, right? So let's say in Scandinavian countries, in those countries they try to make sure that the role of luck in determining where you are in life is limited. So they try to control that particular aspect. So I think that's the kind of society we should build
like
here.
Healthcare,
free education, free daycare,
free daycare,
meals, so that nutrients, vitamins, all those things that matter.
So that you're all at least affordable housing, decent affordable housing,
decent transportation, all those things. What they're really trying to do is to make sure that the role of luck is limited, at least in being able to achieve a basic, dignified kind of existence. Now, if you want to be a billionaire, you want to be a millionaire, okay, you gotta do your thing.
Do your thing.
Go to the casino and see. But for the basics,
sports betting.
Sports betting, exactly. But for basic things, no, we've got to make sure that the state provides that.
Yeah, I love that. I will join that cause. I think it's one of the most noble causes. I don't even think it's a noble cause. It's just a thing that we all
have a responsibility. Exactly. We have a responsibility to do that.
For sure. Yeah. And considering, I think if you think about your future at this point, what are some of the things that you're yet to do, or things that you're still aspiring to achieve?
So my area is sort of being an academic, which is producing knowledge and sharing that knowledge with as many people as I can share. So I think I'm entering a phase of my life where it is time to begin to produce like books, to write books, kind of thing. So it is funny. So sometimes when I write something, like when I write either a blog post or I write some article, it is almost as if one is possessed. And the only way you can cure that possession that you
is to let it out.
To let it out. So I have a lot of these ideas or words that I feel are trapped, and I need to get those words out. So I want to spend the next couple of years, seriously researching and writing, particularly about Zambia's economic history. I think that story hasn't been told very well. So, really figuring out what happened in the 60s.
What did happen in the 60s? There are just so many theories and stories.
Of course,
that
and falsehoods.
They feel like campfire stories.
Exactly. So we really need to document that period, at least. There's so many aspects of that period, right? So there's politics, there's all sorts of things, philosophy. But as an economist, I want to spend my time sort of documenting those periods and then organizing that information in a way that makes sense and then sharing it with others.
I think that would be pretty cool. I look forward to your books. But aside from that what like Zambia's, I don't think we've done a great job at documenting. I don't know if this is a Zambian thing or an African thing, but more and more, when I think about even just like my curiosity, because I love history, right, naturally, but my curiosity, I've found it's just so much easier to find other people's history, you know, or to find other people's history has also just been more, I guess, what's the word? Has become more culturally appropriate, and has just steeped its way into
because we grew up on some of it just comes via Hollywood.
I don't know how many versions of Henry VIII I've seen.
Oh wow, okay, that's
one of my favorite stories.
Oh wow,
I know, I can't help it. It's just
there was one by the Coen brothers, right? On Apple TV. Was there like one?
Was that on HBO?
Oh, so it was that Othello? I don't know. I don't even know any Shakespeare.
So Henry VIII was the guy who killed all his wives. The English king who just was just like very. There is, I know you love TV, so there's HBO did a show called The Tudors.
I remember The Tudors.
Yeah, so that was about Henry VIII. That's one of my favorite shows ever.
Wow,
so good.
Okay.
But like, we digress. I think there's just like Africa is not just like our history is like super rich, but I don't know if it's a matter of documentation or just a matter of making it culturally popular or starting to produce African stories or books. I don't know what it is, but I do feel like my exposure has been mostly, even in high school, my exposure was mostly like to European history and things like that.
So I mean, and it's not the case, you're right, it's not the case that African history is not interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
I think it's fire.
It's exactly, it's fire, it's got protagonists.
Because even the stories in your own family.
Yeah, of course.
Of your great-great-grandfather, yeah, like
oh, that was he was quite a character. So I think it's this, I mean, because humans are pretty much the same everywhere. They've got sort of similar kind of experience. So our stories are interesting and sophisticated. But what we haven't done very well is we haven't funded those parts of our society that are supposed to document, preserve, enrich, add, analyze, present in ways that are interesting, right? We haven't done that. I mean, if you think go look at the Zambian budget, the one that's passed every year, and go and look at how much money in that budget is allocated towards funding the universities.
Yeah.
Very little.
Very minimal.
Relative to other things.
Yeah.
What parts of that budget is dedicated towards funding the arts or culture?
Yes, arts and culture.
Because I mean, that's, like, how do you think, for example, that, how is it that you've read so many versions of Henry VIII?
Yeah.
Right, so there's different kind of scholars who've been studying that particular period and then interpreting it in different ways and making it interesting. Some of it doesn't become full, right?
Yes.
So this stuff doesn't happen accidentally.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to subsidize it. So it's the case. It's not the case that our history is not interesting. It is super, super interesting.
Yeah.
And the bits and pieces that we get from our past are very intriguing. Like this story of, like Musa. This story of, is it Musa? It's Musa Mansa. Mansa Musa, right? The story about this guy.
It's crazy. Right? I was like, what? Like he. How wealthy he was.
Incredibly wealthy.
And when he pulls up in a country, it's like he dries up the economy. Of
course.
Like,
and this person existed.
He did.
And then, but there's so little taught about him or about the universities at Timbuktu, which are supposed to be some of the most ancient places of study. Yeah. Or this new Hollywood film, is it called The Woman King? Is it? It's called The Woman King.
With Viola Davis.
Viola Davis.
Yeah.
But so these are bits and pieces that we've been able to glean from our past, with all its, it's like it's a huge history, but we haven't dedicated resources to be able to uncover that history. And this has to happen. It doesn't happen accidentally. It's not the case that
it's intentional.
It's intentional. Exactly. That's pretty much the point.
This is a great topic, but maybe start a history podcast. So what does with your obsessive nature, slightly obsessed about the right things, and even just, I know your field in particular can also get pretty hectic. What have you come to do for rest? Like, how have you come to find some semblance of balance in your life? I know you're a family man as well. Was that something that came naturally, has it been an intentional journey to carve out rest? Is it something that you're still working on? Like, what does rest look like for you?
Yeah, I think many of us struggle with that, right? So we spend a great deal of our childhood and sort of young adult years wanting to get a job and get a career going, right? But I don't think we have very good training, or at least we don't have a sense of awareness that you might get successful at it, and then how do you handle this pressure, the demands? So I will say it's very difficult. Right now it's very difficult to like juggle all the demands, all the sort of interest in my work, all the requests that come through, and it's very dangerous for you to spend all your time just just working. But you're right. My wife and I have got 2 kids, right, under 5. So that helps us. But by definition, you have no choice.
Yeah, I was about to say it's not like they give you a choice.
Yeah, like you've got my daughter always comes to ask, when are you gonna take a break?
Oh wow!
Right? Like she's because she wants to play.
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
So that helps. And then you talked about you and I with my wife. Once we share like an interest in TV.
Yeah.
Right.
We love TV.
Love TV. So lots of TV watching.
Yeah.
Like lots of and then attempting to exercise.
Yeah.
Which is always difficult.
Of course it is.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
What are you watching right now? What TV show are you watching right now? And what's your favorite? It's hard to always pick one. I'll say, what's your favorite 2 TV shows of all time?
Wow. Maybe let me try to answer the last one, the latter question first.
Yeah.
Favorite 2 TV shows of all time.
Yeah.
That's so I was gripped like many Zambians in the early to mid 90s by No One But You.
Oh,
did you remember that?
Did we have? Man, I loved it so much.
Yeah, like
I loved No One But You.
And it's like when you go back and watch it and see why it gripped us as kids. It's interesting, gripped kids.
Did you go back? Watch it?
I've watched snippets of it and I've sort of thought about it.
Yeah.
But it's like there's a villain.
There is.
Right, and then there's like
there's a
handsome
with the broad chested.
Exactly, and
imposing villain.
Yeah, so I would say No One But You was a pretty interesting show.
I think it was very good.
It's very good. Okay, is it my top 2? I mean, it's up there, but obviously, Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad was also pretty deep.
Breaking Bad was also just unassuming. Like you weren't sure it would be good. Like I started it without knowing it would be so good.
Exactly.
I was like, and then before you know it, I was like, what?
And then that was
such a good show.
Yeah. So
stellar acting.
Yes. So there was this period in the US, I think in the early 2000s, or in the 2000s at least, when they were taking out great shows. So Breaking Bad, Boardwalk Empire.
Oh man, Boardwalk Empire! Good. I think I've seen it 3 times, like from start to finish.
Wow, that was a great show. I've never seen The Wire though, but I've heard The Wire.
It's so funny. I've never seen The Wire either.
Yeah.
It's one of my older brother's favorite shows, and a lot of people's favorite shows. And also the gentleman Michael, the gentleman who just passed away. Who passed away maybe a year ago. He was in Boardwalk Empire.
He was in Boardwalk Empire.
Chalky White.
Chalky White.
Yeah, he was one of the stars in
The Wire.
In The Wire. Yeah, why did his name just go?
Yeah, his name was also gone.
Yeah.
So, but let me answer your question, and then I'll also ask you what your best 2 are.
So after this, you get to ask me 3 questions.
I get to ask you 3 questions, so I should remember.
Yeah.
So I think Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm trying to squeeze in No One But You because it
gripped me. I think it kicked off something in us.
Yeah, like
we learned the art of TV watching and following.
Exactly. And then this setup of a villain, a hero,
and the damsel.
And damsel who has to be rescued.
Yes.
So like that was very interesting.
And a mother. It's always like a matriarch.
And there's a matriarch. Yeah, there's a very powerful matriarch. And then who's conflicted because she loves both her sons. So exactly.
But somehow always lets her bad son get away with.
Which is kind of related to how life is lived, right? The good ones are always punished, and then the bad ones are always given leeway.
Always rewarded.
So I would say Breaking Bad and Succession, which just finished.
Succession is.
Yeah, Succession was pretty powerful.
Succession is.
It's pretty.
I haven't seen the last season because I want to binge.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
No,
but when I get into Succession, I haven't dream about it.
I know it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's intense.
Yeah, it is.
It can be very intense. It can.
Those are TV shows I even pause sometimes.
Yeah,
like,
it's pretty intense. Yeah, so
I
I would say those two.
Okay.
I remember to ask you.
But I've seen. I can tell your tastes. I see you like the.
Darker film. Darker series. Darker shows.
Yeah. I think. Anyway, you ask me. So we like to end every podcast with the interviewee becoming the interviewer. And you're given, depending, you could ask one, you can ask two, but you're given up to 3 questions to ask me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will ask you, what is your blood type? No.
Listen, I
you
know
say
it's O plus.
O plus?
Yeah.
Is that the one that
the universal donor?
Wow. So very valuable.
I'm a valuable bee.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'll remember that. I'll
Please,
write it down.
Just give me a call, yeah.
But let me ask my first real question.
Yeah.
So why this podcast? Why did you start a podcast?
I get asked this a lot, and I hope I don't answer it so different that people are like, Chipo, please, why really? But I think one of the big reasons for me is that I wanted a podcast to kind of answer questions that I get asked all the time.
Okay.
And so that's one, because I get all these questions around around career, around people feeling unsure of themselves, around people, they ask very big life questions. And I think, like I always say, I'm always voice noting answers. And if I get all those questions so often, I thought to myself, like, what about if I create a bigger platform where I talk to people that I think have kind of look comfortable in their careers, and not comfortable like complacent. Like they found something, they enjoy it, they are good at it, and they feel good about it as well. Because I think ultimately that's what we all want. We want to do something that we feel is meaningful.
Correct.
And sadly, we have a lot of people, either by choice or by circumstance, because both are. Yeah. It's very possible for both. But we have a lot of people that are afraid to make the decision, but also that feel very far removed from a lot of individuals they admire. And I think it's also just to demystify that, Grieve's also just a person, Chipo Chedu is also just a person, and all my other guests are just a person with that's why we go to childhood, a normal childhood, and their life is not as as glamorous, or they didn't have these very special things happen to them. They just did a few things. Yeah, and then there's luck. And so luck, of course. But you talked about consistency. Yeah. You talked about other things that kind of also add to that, and that's kind of that secret sauce we try to share on this platform. But also, I just really like
talking with people. And that's true. Really enjoy it. So I wasn't surprised when I saw you tweet that you are starting a podcast. Yeah. I was like, that's exactly the natural next step, because Chipo Chedu loves to talk with people, to engage with people. Yes, because we met about 5 years ago. We used to do this with my wife and you. We used to meet at the Radisson on a Friday for just have sundowners. Some sundowners and talk and about just talk everything. I love those conversations. So so it makes sense. So I really enjoy it. I could do this all day. Oh, fantastic! It's a great podcast. I've seen the other episodes you've had, some really, really interesting people. Thanks. So my second question is, if somebody was thinking about, say, a young person wanted to join a company, right? And often what folks are always thinking about is the pay. So that seems to be a very big part of how they think about, should I take up this opportunity at this company? What's your advice? What should somebody look out for in choosing a place of work? What's some of the most important things to consider that make for a great work, rewarding so workplace? My advice for first job is just that. Okay. So sometimes it's very difficult in the beginning to be a chooser, especially in an economy like ours, where the graduates are more than the jobs, right?
I think a first job is very important, even if the pay, you might not care about the mission or the values, about the business, about who your boss will be. There's some of the things that come to matter a lot later, or the pay. I think the invaluable thing that first jobs teach is just how to work.
I see.
You can easily tell. I don't have any real data to back this up, but I've seen in my career that you can tell the people that kind of miss those fundamental steps. It's kind of like going to school, and when they say even how they set the grade 12 exam is very like psychometric, or it's very like it's, you can tell the people that miss those fundamental first steps that just teach you discipline. So if, for example, you're thinking about your first jobs, and it's very unfortunate that our economy once again doesn't allow for us to work when we're like in high school and when we're students. It's very hard to get a job because those jobs are reserved for people that are feeding their families, you know.
Good point.
But it's literally like showing up on time, being able to take instructions, being able to work with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different ages, being respectful of young, old, different colleagues. There's a fundamental way of working you learn with that first job. So that's why I always try to encourage people when they're out of university, when they're out of high school, and they have that opportunity to not be so picky, because there's certain things you learn, there's a discipline you get, it's even just waking up
so
and showing up on time and making sure you are presentable.
Are these the so-called like soft skills that people say? Or
I would say they're soft skills, but I think it's just like, I don't know what it is. It's also like a hard skill, because remember, a hard skill can also be like learning to show up. Okay, these are your instructions for the day, and you can't leave until you're done. So normally you'd leave at 5 p.m., but that learning that discipline of I'll stay till after 5 until I get this done. There's a rhythm that you learn, such that when you get to a place where you're choosing your second job, so that was like pretty crappy job to start. Then when you come to start choosing your second job, you start to curate a little. You start to learn a little, like, okay, after all this donkey work I've done, I don't want to work in finance. I actually, because at that point you're talking to people, exposure, you get your salary, you go to granddaddies, you meet people, you get exposed to different careers, you start learning, right? So you're like, and you hear this a lot, like, I'm looking for a job in an NGO. You can hear people starting to formulate their, and my career at that point, which starts at the now, first job, learn those important foundation skills. Second job, you start to pay attention, follow that, because certain things attract you to certain places. Some people like I know people who just like certain workplaces because they get to dress up.
Oh wow!
And that's a thing, and that's okay. But you're learning that. You're learning that if I work in a certain environment, it's jeans and sneakers. We don't care. But in this environment, honey, your heels will thrive.
You gotta dress
and
up,
and you just start to learn. You start to learn that about yourself, the type of environment. Some people, like, you start to curate that a little. Then you learn about bad bosses, difficult bosses. You learn about leadership, and then you start realizing, like, I want to work under so and so, such. So it just starts to get.
I see.
But I think you have to think about it, and you have to be intentional, and you have to start choosing you have to start making those decisions intentionally as you go. A lot of people resign to whatever, and they give their career away to the powers that be, and that's where you find a lot of frustrated, disgruntled people. Even when they have a choice to start making decisions about what they want to do, where they want to be, they just kind of give it away to HR and to the leaders, say, oh, you figure it out for me. So that's the advice I'd give. Like, just get your first job, just learn, and then after that, start paying attention to what you like, and then you start to move accordingly. I think you always have, all of us have a story of a pretty tough job or a rough experience. It's life. But you start to learn. Like, even that rough experience makes you realize, like, no, never doing that again.
That's
and then
true.
You go to like a different direction.
I think that's a great point. I mean, the part about, so you gotta learn some skills, stuff they don't teach you in school,
They don't teach you in school.
Being punctual, following instructions, learning to take criticism, in a very, that kind of stuff.
And like you said, when it comes to chance, it's also even exposure to a computer. You might get a call center job the first time. Not the most glamorous thing.
But then
you get because not all of us have access to computers in university. right?
Yeah.
So you get access to a computer where you start to learn
Yeah.
computer skills, and that becomes, even like typing is such a key skill.
Wow.
Like,
Correct,
like
you're right.
typing makes you, how fast you type is how fast you can be productive. You know
Wow,
what I mean?
you're
So
right.
so those first jobs should, I think we should go back to encouraging people to just, like, it's never a waste. Just go and
Hang on to whatever
hang
you can
on to it. It won't be a long time, and trust that it won't be a long time.
Yeah.
Trust you won't be stuck.
Correct.
The next thing will come.
And then the second thing you said, which is really important, the first job teaches you to know what you like and what you don't like in a workplace.
Yes.
And you can take that up
Then
as
you start, and as you go,
I use the word curate, as you
yeah,
curate
you start to curate,
the rest of your,
you know, because I'm sure you get offers these days, you get calls, and you just know that.
Yeah,
no,
I
that's
can't
not
be a
my thing.
rebel leader in Congo, dear. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
exactly,
come on,
exactly.
like, oh no, that I can't.
Yeah, exactly. But that there was a time in your career where you
I'd
were
have
just like,
taken
oh
it.
yes, how much in dollars? I'm coming.
Wow.
You know?
What's the risk? I could die. Okay, but it's worth it. I'm going. No, but you're right.
Yeah.
It's a good point. It's a
Yeah.
good point. Okay, and then the third. I mean, I was gonna cheat a little bit and ask. So when is the book coming? Where you? Because all this you've learned
Yeah.
in your profession.
Yeah.
You've seen so many resumes. You've placed so many people.
So many.
And there are patterns there. So when are
Yeah.
you going to document that stuff?
That's a really good question. No one has ever asked me that.
So I'll get commission.
Yeah, you
I'll
have to,
definitely get
agents
book.
fee. I want to start writing. So I want to start newsletters or blogging, because I think I can write. I have a feeling, because I know it's presumptuous, but I'm like, I read so much. Surely
I should be able to write.
Surely, if I tried.
Yeah.
So I would love to write a book, actually, but it's never been something that I've actively thought about. But it would be pretty cool.
I see.
It would
Okay.
be pretty cool. I think I just prefer talking to write.
So you should talk and then somebody transcribes it.
Yes.
But my last question.
Yeah.
Your best 2 shows of all time, TV shows of all time.
That's a very hard one.
And you can't name the ones I named.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
When I said 2 for you, I was like, that is very unfair.
That's very unfair.
So, favorite 2 TV shows. I think Game of Thrones, for sure.
Okay.
Yes, a disappointing 8th season. However, I absolutely loved that show.
Wow.
I
never did watch it.
Oh man, it was so good. I loved the characters. I loved the character development. I loved the, the Game of the Thrones.
Wow.
Awesome.
Wow.
So Game of Thrones is definitely a favorite. Second, when you say Boardwalk Empire, I remembered how much I watched it. I've watched it over and over again so many times. But I'm not going to mention that one. I think another show I really liked is Girls. HBO.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Girls.
Girls
is also like, these are just my top 5. I have others. I'll just mention 2. But yeah, I think Game of Thrones for sure, and Girls. Girls was it's like something I'd never seen before. They had said, oh, it's going to be like Sex and the City. And when I watched, I was like, this is not like Sex and the City. But wait, it's also really good. Yeah. So I really enjoyed Girls.
Can I tell you a girl story? So the girl who played, is it Marty? I can't remember.
Yes,
Marty. Yeah. I met her on a plane from Johannesburg to Lusaka, of all places.
What was she?
She came here, I think, for some charity work. Now, what was I doing watching Girls? My wife strapped me in a chair and forced me to watch it.
Yes.
I didn't watch it because I watched under duress.
But Mansa knows what's good. Mansa knows what's good.
Yeah, so I met her on a plane.
That is very odd, because I was talking to someone who's like in entertainment in Zambia, and she was telling me 2 guys from Yellowstone were giving a lecture at UNZA. I said, but you guys,
why isn't this
how
like?
don't I know?
Yeah, why didn't
And she
you
showed
blast
me their
it?
picture,
Wow.
and like there's this guy, I actually really like his character. I was like, they were in Lusaka at UNZA.
Amazing, right?
Crazy.
Yeah. So
I feel like I should just monitor the airport. The airport.
Just
because you hear people like, oh, so met Brad Pitt, met Matt Damon. Where are you meeting these people?
That's true. So I cut you off Girls, and then
Girls, Game of Thrones. I could say so many more, but I would also have to say the Tudors, the same one I was talking about with about Henry VIII.
Okay.
That's another one of my favorites.
Wow.
And of course, like all those you said, Breaking Bad, Succession, Yellowstone.
I see.
Um,
So there's a bit of some commonalities
Yes.
in our because
darkness, death,
darkness,
seizing power.
seizing power,
Yeah,
the
what
Tudors.
is that about? What we should examine this.
Yeah, is it?
Why do we like it?
I
Why
don't
do we
know.
like
Why are we so obsessed?
Yeah.
So are you going to be a politician? Then are you going to run for political office one day?
I think I will. I think I'll do something.
Nice.
And the reason is I want to live a life where I try lots of things. So I think I might. I'm curious about politics.
I see. Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I want to see if it's translatable. Like everything I've learned in life is translatable.
I see.
I'm curious. So I might.
No, I will vote for you.
You better.
I will.
I need all the 3 votes. You, my mom,
and my
and Mwansa.
and Mwansa.
Yeah.
I was gonna say when I asked the question, but are you gonna be a politician? You paused, and then I thought you were going to say no comment. I was like, oh, she's a politician already.
Yeah. And the reason I almost said no comment, but then I was like, eh.
Am I? Because that's what politicians do,
Yes,
right?
like, no
Did
comment.
you steal the money? No comment.
No comment.
Then they stole it.
Yeah. No, I think I'm going to do something, because I also realize politics is also, like, there's a bit of a. It's a wide array. There's different things you can do.
Yeah, correct.
So it's not just the highest office. As much as yes, we're intrigued by power.
Uh-huh.
It's not just the highest office. I think there are other things you can
Correct.
do. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. But a lot of things will have to change before then, I hope. But that's only like not so many years away because TikTok. But I would ideally hope a lot of things change. But also don't tell me you are that's changed. No. Let someone else be that change, then I come and ride off there.
No, I think excuse me, I've got some reason
No worries. It happens all the time.
I was gonna say you're gonna make a great politician, really. Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah, you will.
Coming from you who is interested in politics or has studied politics, I'm taking that seriously.
I mean,
said I'm doing this why? Because Grieve said I'll make a good politician.
I mean, you have to be extroverted.
Yeah.
Right? You have to enjoy talking with people.
Yes.
I
certainly do.
And you certainly like that. You're genuinely interested in people.
Yes.
You're genuinely interested in figuring out their situation in life. I think you've got to make it. And I think there have been a few politicians in history, even in Zambian history, who have been great. I think great, genuine, decent human beings who genuinely care about improving the lot of their people. So I think it's unfair for me earlier to have said politicians work very well with contradictions. Most of them, but there are some who are really good. There are few who are incredibly.
I'm going to follow up with you with names of some of the people you think were.
I think it's not unreasonable to say, like Kenneth Kaunda, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was a politician in that mode.
Yeah.
I think he genuinely cared.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Kenneth Kaunda was, I think, a politician in that mode.
Yeah.
And I think Levi Mwanawasa.
Yeah, people say that a lot about Levi Mwanawasa. Yeah.
Obviously, it's easier to assess somebody when they have left.
Of course.
Office. when the person is in office, we're incredibly critical, understandably so. So one hopes people will say the same thing about President Chilema.
Yeah, we remain optimistic.
Yeah, right. So
yeah.
So
this was great. Thanks, Grieve. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's just very easy to just get into the flow of things. So I appreciate you coming to the podcast and just like being really engaging and also just talking about a different array of topics. These are my favorites where we talk about like, oh, now we're being serious and then now we're talking about TV shows. Like I think a human being is also just a very we are a lot of things. None of us are just one thing. So I think it's really important to also just showcase the different things that we are.
What did Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi say? She talked about like we don't leave one issue. It's like we're not like one-dimensional beings.
Yes.
We are many things. So I want to say thanks for having me, Chipo. Like really, I mean, it's an honor. When I got your WhatsApp asking me, I read it twice. I said, "Is she sure?" Like, come on, man. Like she's had some really cool people on her podcast, so I'm honored. and I'm like, I know I'm looking forward to following your career, man. Like I'm just with interest.
With
Yeah,
interest.
yeah.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
Fascinating.
As Proust said, as Proust once said.
Karl Marx. Okay, let me wrap this up. So thank you so much for watching this really cool episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, make sure you click the like button and you subscribe. Also, rate and review us on all the other podcast platforms that you might be listening on. So yeah, until the next time, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.